the MS Michigan Man 64 podcast. My name is Brian Wallace, and I am the MS Michigan Man 64. The MS Michigan Man 64 podcast is about chronic disease awareness. I have had multiple sclerosis for the last 27 years. It's an invisible chronic disease that I've been battling for half of my life. I want to share with you what it is like living with the chronic disease from my experiences and the experiences of other chronic disease warriors. We can fight to have a voice to those that want to listen. Together, we can motivate and educate. Hi, welcome to the MS Michigan Man 64 podcast. Today, I am sitting down with an MSer from the state of Maryland. Mike was diagnosed with MS, and the awesome thing about Mike and just his attitude is he is a U.S. Navy vet, and he served some time in the military, so I first want to thank him for his service because I love our vets. But please welcome to the podcast, Mike. How you doing, Mike?
I'm good, Brian. Thank you for having me on.
I appreciate you, buddy. Anybody that wants to talk about their story about getting diagnosed with MS or any other chronic disease, I am all for it. So, Mike, can you kind of take us through your journey of your symptoms and, what your life was like? Because I know most people, everything usually is going good in their life and when they're going through their symptoms. So just kind of take us through what led up to your diagnosis, what you were experiencing, and how you ended up getting diagnosed with MS.
Well, thank you, Brian. Back prior to diagnosis, I was actually about 28, 29 years old. I had just started a sales job, and it was a very demanding sales job, and I sold mortgages for a couple of years. And during that time, I was really busy. I was working probably 60 hours a week. I was working two jobs because I was working as a salesman by day and an executive chef for my cousin at night at a restaurant in my town where I lived at before. And started having symptoms. The most random symptom, the first one I had in 2006 was my eye issue. Down with uveitis. Uveitis is eye inflammation. And I went to a doctor. I got referred to an ophthalmologist, normal protocol. They diagnosed me with uveitis. Mm-hmm. They prescribed steroid eye drops. That got better within 30 days. And then it went about my day. At the same time, mm-hmm. That was going on. I felt numbness in my right side of my body, and it was really weird. It was really like I was wearing like a long sleeve shirt at all times, even with no shirt on at all, or pants with no pants on at all. And I went back to the doctor. They had referred me to neurology at that point because that was a random issue, and I had a test with electrodes. And the neurologist was able to tell me that my nerves on my right side of my body was less reactive than my left side of my body, which was confirmed me. But at the same time, the neurologist did say, compared to everybody else, you're still normal. So went about my day. Within another month or two, I started having some cognitive issues. Well, I was a busy salesman, working 2 full-time jobs pretty much, working in 2-3 different states. It was really interesting. And I kind of chalked it up to, you're just overdoing it. Let's take it easy a little bit. And I brushed that symptom off. Little I know, that was my third symptom, was cognitive. And things had gotten better as far as the vision is concerned. And then the numbness stayed there. The cognitive was hit or miss. Next year, the next summer, I had we got vertigo, and I woke up one morning to go to the bathroom, 5 in the morning, normal start of my day. I went to the bathroom, turned around in my bathroom, and fell flat on my face. I couldn't stand up. Wow. I couldn't get my balance. The earth was spinning. My entire being was spinning, and I had to crawl to my bedroom. I had to throw the bedroom door open, and yell for my wife and said, "Hey, I can't get up off the ground." And back then I was 6'3", 260, so I'm not a small guy. My wife is 5'8", and she had to call her dad who lived at least down the street from us, to help me get to the car to get to the hospital. And at the hospital, I got diagnosed with vertigo. And then I lived with vertigo for about 3 months straight. I was actually driving to work. I was so used to it at that point. I was just, I knew how to react to it when I felt tremors coming on for the vertigo. I was able to pause and balance myself and it was really interesting. And so that was about a year and a half at that point.
Let me ask you this.
Go ahead.
So let me ask you this, Mike. You're going through all this. This is a year, and you're going to see doctors, and they're diagnosing you with vertigo and all that. Has anybody thought ever to run you through an MRI and take a picture of your brain?
I did actually have at that point 2 MRIs, one of my C-spine and one of my brain. Neither showed anything at that point. Now the brain MRI did show one spot that 2 MRIs later, once I finally got my diagnosis MRI in October 2007 for my MS, which was actually the MRI was September 2007. The neurologist called me at home on a Wednesday night, or like a Tuesday night, a week before my birthday, and said, "You might have MS." He goes, "Don't Google this." He goes, "Just make a note of it, and I'll see you next week in my office." And I brought the films in, because back then we had films, not disc. I brought my films to his office. He goes, "Well, you have MS," because it actually showed lesions finally. And that was the 4th MRI in the course of a year and a half. And the first MRI of the brain I had in 2006 showed one spot on my brain, but you and I both know MS is multiple lesions. You have to have more than one, and that was the first lesion. But then the 4th MRI, finally, in 2007, showed multiple lesions to diagnose MS.
Yeah. You know what's really interesting about that is that, okay, you showed one lesion, but you were having multiple symptoms. You know, you were having the vision, and you were having the tingling, but there was still not enough there to give you the diagnosis. And that is just really interesting, just listening to somebody that actually went through that type of a diagnosis, because, you know, there are people out there that they do see a couple of lesions on their brain, and they're still not getting that diagnosis. And then just in a short period of time, you get another MRI, and now there's multiple lesions, and now that they can give you that official diagnosis of MS. That's just really interesting, Mike, on that path of it and how that it just went for you.
It was really interesting. I meet people today, they get diagnosed within a month or 2 months, and I always say that's amazing that you got diagnosed that fast, because, you know, I have one friend who took 10 years to diagnose her. She looked back to her symptoms after her diagnosis. She's well, this is for 10 years. And that's just the complexity of MS. And that's something we're learning to this day, because back when I was diagnosed and back when you were diagnosed, there was 3 types of MS. You have your RRMS, relapse remitting MS, your primary progressive, secondary progressive. Now they have clinical diagnosis. We'll back up for that part. Clinically isolated MS. Which is like you just said, you have one lesion, you're showing multiple symptoms, and that's nowadays where they're getting the more advanced diagnosis nowadays, because they have the knowledge from history past.
Yeah, absolutely. So let me ask you this, Mike. You were like right around the same age as me, and you were in really, really good shape. And, you know, you got all this stuff going on, and you're getting told MS, and you're married. How did that affect your life, your mental health? How did you deal with that diagnosis? Did you even understand what MS was when you got diagnosed?
At first, I didn't understand what MS was, and I told my grandmother. And the way she reacted to me when I told her, it was like I told her I had cancer. Because she had one aunt. She had one aunt, who was my grand aunt, in Florida. I guess it was back before I was even born, or before she even came from Florida to Maryland. That actually had MS, and she had passed away due to complications of MS. So we didn't really know much about MS. Only one person in our family that we knew of with MS. My mother had autoimmune diseases, psoriasis was hers. I had one autoimmune disease diagnosed in the military, eczema. And I was diagnosed in
Okay.
99. So that was my first autoimmune disease I diagnosed was in the military. And that
Gotcha.
MS was number 2. And then I eventually got diagnosed with Crohn's and ulcerative colitis as well.
Oh, wow. Man, you're just hitting them all, aren't you? Jesus Christ.
Yes.
Man.
I'm a good time.
So how, I mean, again, I'm just going to go back to the mental health because I think that the mental part of having this disease is the hardest part. How did you process that mentally when you were 28 years old and you had your family members telling you, you know, that somebody in the family died from this disease? I know when I got diagnosed with MS, I didn't know anything about it. And the more I learned about it, I'm like, my first reaction was, holy shit, you're screwed. But then the more that I just said, you know what, if it's going to take me down, I'm going to go down with a fight. And I just, you know, I went into a weight room and I started exercising. How did you process this mentally when you were first diagnosed?
When the doctor diagnosed me, I had just turned 30 4 days prior. And I was kind of, I was shocked, scared, and relieved. I was relieved because for a year and a half, it got to a point where so much random medical issues I was having. I would see friends of mine at a restaurant, at a bar, because I was pretty active lifestyle at the bars where I lived downtown. And I would go to a bar and it was kind of like, hey, Mike, what's wrong today? And I got that from my friends for about a year and a half. And finally I could say, I have MS. And I had something to put with my issues and we could treat it. My neurologist was very proactive. In 2007, my neurologist, he's like, here's 3 pamphlets. Back then, he's like, here's Avonex, here's Rebif, here's Betaseron. Take these information pamphlets home, study them, and we'll talk in a month, and we'll decide what disease modifying drug to go on. And that was my introduction. That hey, I have MS, but hey, it's treatable. That was my saving grace. I was really relieved at that point. I kind of spiraled after that. I started treatment in December of 2007 with Rebif, the injectable, 3 days a week.
Yeah.
And, I kind of got into a dark phase, depression phase, because I went to my first Walk MS event in 2008, and I saw canes and walkers. And before I really understood what MS was, it kind of scared me.
Yeah.
And I reached it. Yeah, it's a life-changing disease or a life-changing decision or illness, and I was like, this is forever? And the neurologist was like, yes, this is forever. There's no cure for this. You have to figure out how to deal with your life now. We have medication to treat and also lifestyle changes. He recommended exercise. He recommended us to keep moving. I did some light working out. I think I joined Planet Fitness back then, but I wasn't doing as much as I should have. And I started doing Bike MS in 2009, and I started seeing more of the community of MS and seeing more of, hey, MS is not just canes and wheelchairs. We have people who live with MS that ride bikes, and I wanted to be like that. And once I saw, I got done. I had a flare in 2010. They put me in the hospital for about a week and a half. I couldn't walk. I got vertigo really bad again. And I was in the hospital for about a week and a half. I came out of the hospital. I made a decision to bike harder. I wanted to beat this disease. We went to an event for the MS Society back then. It was called Can Do MS. It was kind of a partnership event. They had patients and caregivers with MS and people who help people with MS. And it was kind of like a motivation event. It was 1-day event, 8-hour long, to motivate you to get active and to be proactive and be advocate for yourself. And I made the decision right then to be better than I could be. And I bought a proper road bike in January of 2011. And within 9 months after my first major flare, I cycled my first 100-mile bike ride in June of that year. And I met a woman who lived with MS after that ride. I said, I just finished my first century with MS. And she goes, that's awesome. She was, this is my 15th century and I have MS as well. I was like, okay, right. I want to be like you. And I kind of looked at that. She was, I can't remember her name offhand, but She was also on the board for the local with the Bike MS committee, and I eventually went on the board with the local MS committee as well for Bike MS and Walk MS. And she was definitely a motivator for me to be better. And I launched a kind of a social media platform for myself just to track my history called Mike Bikes for MS on Facebook, and just to show my history. And yeah, I was 6'3", 260. Now I'm 6'2" because I'm shrinking, but I'm 204 now. So I lost 60 pounds. And so cycling did a lot. And I went gluten-free for my Crohn's about 6 years ago. And I've made a couple of lifestyle changes. And I've quit smoking cigarettes years ago, which was, it's not good for us all. But I felt at the end of the day, like I felt better. I told people at the time that Bike MS probably saved my life. Because it gave me a platform to get moving. It gave me a platform to show people that diseases are invisible.
Yeah.
And that we're all doing something.
Yeah. And it's a motivation, Mike, and we need to find that motivation to keep us moving and to keep us fighting. And I totally relate to that. And, you found biking. And when early in my diagnosis, my neurologist told me, Brian, do not change anything that you're doing. I was 27 years old. I was in good shape. I loved to work out. I loved to run. I was a runner. But MS took that ability of running away from me. I wasn't able to run again. But I never left the weight room. I killed it every day, 5 days a week. I was in the weight room. I was on an elliptical. I was, because I had the handrails, and I figured out how to attack this disease, the physical part of it. And it worked for me. I know that my way of doing things isn't going to be the same way that everybody is going to be able to do it. But I just think it's so important just to hear how other people attack this disease and the successes that they have. Like you found biking. And, I know a lady, Kathy Chester, MS Disrupted. She ran a half marathon after a diagnosis. I mean, it's not impossible. There are so many awesome things that you can still do after diagnosis. Don't quit your dreams. Like you're biking now, and there's a guy up in Alaska I did an episode with. He's in the weight room. He's a power lifter now. The guy's freaking huge. He went from 210 pounds to 260 pounds after diagnosis. I mean, everybody has a way to attack this disease, and I just love your way, Mike. It's awesome. Awesome. Awesome.
Yeah, it's been really good for me in my health, physical and mental. I actually started running a couple years ago. I was never a good runner. I was a guy in the military who would run and smoke a cigarette during the run, the PT run. My chief was yelling at me. But I started running 4 years ago with my sister. She's 7 years older than me. She's an avid runner, and we do the Bay Bridge run here in Maryland every year. It's Veterans Day weekend across the Chesapeake Bay Bridge. It's a 10K, and I've done it a couple of years now with her, and it's an amazing event. And I'll let her be the long distance runner. I might do a marathon one day. We'll see. But right now, cycling for me is low impact, and I can go far on the bike.
Yeah, and it's just awesome, Mike. So let's talk about your the family. When you got diagnosed, you said you were married, and I know that relationships are another big factor in chronic diseases, and it's led to divorces. I went through a divorce. Can you just kind of tell us how your wife accepted the diagnosis of MS?
I feel like my diagnosis made us stronger, because my wife dealt with fibromyalgia for a long time and spine issues for a long time. She has degenerative disc disease, and now she has a fused spine. She had to have before the pandemic. She actually had her C4, 5, and 6 fused at the top of her spine, and so she lives in constant pain. And so for us, the marriage, the old additive, the 50-50. It's not always 50-50. Yeah. Sometimes it's 70, sometimes it's 30. Like when I'm down, she's up. When she's down, I'm up. So we're a team of this. We're a team of this. We don't have children. we're in this together, and we can give each other grace. We know when the other one's doing bad. We can see each other's face. So, hey, I know you're having a good day. How are you feeling? Hey, can I do something to help you? It's all about that communication, Brian. And that's why I see a lot of marriages fail, because there's no communication there.
Yeah. I 100% agree with you, Mike. Like I said, I went through a divorce. I'm not going to blame MS totally on my divorce, but it had a little bit to do with it. I mean, she was new to the diagnosis too. When I got diagnosed, we were just engaged. So, I mean, and we made it 15 years, but I mean, my point is that, when I did find my wife that I'm married to now, she can relate to my diagnosis too, because she has fibromyalgia. And she also has a daughter on the autism spectrum. So she just gets the disability and the chronic disease. And we kind of piggyback off each other too. She has her days where she struggles and I help her out, and I have my days that I struggle. So I totally get that. And that is so important, just to understand your spouse and their chronic disease. And it's kind of frustrating that it takes a spouse to have a chronic disease to understand it, but it is just important to have a spouse that just can relate to that, having a diagnosis with you and fighting right alongside with you.
Definitely, I agree.
So, talk to me about your DMT journey. Because I know you said you started out on the Rebif, but with as long as you've been on it, I know I haven't been on. I'm not on the same DMT that I first started on. So, what has been your journey on your DMTs?
My first DMT was Rebif in 2007. I started in December 2007. I reacted well to it. I had one episode of the flu-like symptoms, the side effects that we all get from DMTs. I had one negative for side effects. I was on Rebif for about 10 years until I switched. I had two flares in the 10 years. I saw a neurologist who said, well, we have pills now, so we have other things to try now, and you've had two flares in 10 years. You might want to try something else. So we tried Gilenya, which is a pill. It was actually the second pill for MS that came out. That one came out after Tecfidera. I want to say 2012 or 13. My history knowledge on that might not be correct, but I'm around the same time frame. But I did Gilenya for about 6 months. Reason I went off of that was because I got an infection, and that infection led to my Crohn's diagnosis. So, Gilenya, the way it works is it hides your B cells, so you're at risk for an infection. I got the infection after my B cells I was in the hospital visiting my wife during surgery, and I guess I caught something while I was in the hospital, and that eventually led to the Crohn's diagnosis. So I went off Rebif, I went off of Gilenya, and went back to Rebif for about 6 months till I got baseline again, and then we tried Tysabri. After I started seeing a GI doctor for my Crohn's. I was already seeing one for my ulcerative colitis, but we had talked about medications for Crohn's because now we have the added MS and Crohn's diagnosis. And I found that researching online and advocating for myself, they were using Tysabri to treat Crohn's and MS over in Europe. And my GI doctor wanted me to do Humira, but Humira can cause demyelinization. Demyelinization is MS. So I was against that right away. And once I found the study about the Tysabri treating Crohn's, I talked to my neurologist. I talked to my GI doctor. I got a second opinion from University of Maryland GI Center, and they agreed that Humira was not the right drug for me. They thought that Tysabri was probably a better drug for me than Humira. So we went to we went to Tysabri about 7 years ago. And I was on Tysabri for about 5 years. And we hear the commercials about the PML risk for these mod drugs for MS and Crohn's and all the ones for autoimmune diseases nowadays. Well, I'm JC positive. My JC level was 1.77. So I do get treated by the VA now for my MS. And they did say 1.77 is too high for our comfort level. So they may be switched to another medication. So now I'm on a Bongio, which is another pill. So I've been on Bongio now for almost 2 years, and so far so good. I'm knock on wood. I feel pretty good. The fatigue though is just as bad. The one thing Tysabri did that I can't get back is the energy levels. So Tysabri was kind of a wonder drug for me. I would take my test. I would actually also do my Tysabri around big bike events, because I would get my infusion on a Friday and go around 100 miles on Saturday and feel fantastic. But now the fatigue is pretty high nowadays, and I've had, because I live with MS, with the Crohn's, with the ulcerative colitis. The Crohn's and colitis are kind of in remission, if you would say. They're the only problems I have there from there now is urgency, and I have to watch what I eat. Other than that, they're pretty good. I do the fatigue though does get me down sometimes from the MS. So that takes a lot out of me sometimes. I have to balance my spoons daily.
Yeah. It's just interesting to hear how you researched your DMTs. I never really did a whole lot of research on my own. I just kind of trusted my neurologist, but the more that I have learned, just from talking to people, it is really important to do that research. I did an episode with a lady in Maryland. She actually was in the U.S. Navy, and she did 20 years singing at the White House. And she was telling me that they put her on Ocrevus, and she eventually, after a year and a half, 2 years, she got diagnosed with breast cancer. And then she found out afterwards that Ocrevus could lead to cancer. And she thinks that the Ocrevus is what actually caused her breast cancer. And I don't have any reason to deny her, but I just think that, and when she did her episode, she even emphasized it is so important to do the research on it, and that's just great that you did. And I tell everybody, do your research, because I didn't do it. But it is really important to do the research on these DMTs.
One of the first things I did after being diagnosed, I met people through work who had MS. I met people who locally to me had MS. I found a support group through Facebook locally to me. And at the support group, the first question was, what DMT are you on? Who's your doctor? And they came at me, and I was like, okay, calm down. I was like, I'm newly diagnosed here. I'm still learning the ropes here. And but the information was the questions were important, because after being in that support group for about 6 months, I saw new patients come to that group that were newly diagnosed. Their doctors only gave them one medication, one choice. My doctor, because back then when I was diagnosed, there were only 4 medications available. There were 3 injections. The 4th wasn't available yet, and Tysabri. So we had 3 injections for regular MS and Tysabri for your advanced cases of MS. And back then, you need to have all the options. And I tell people today, when they're new diagnosed, I'm an ambassador now for MS Society. So I do talk to people who are diagnosed with MS, all new diagnosis all the time. Friends on Facebook will say, hey, I got a friend just diagnosed. Will you talk to them? My first question is, what did the doctor prescribe you? Because there are now 26 medications for MS. It's not a one-size-fits-all medication. It's not a one-size-fits-all disease. Nope. My diet, my exercise, my DMTs, my mental, all plays in part of it. You can't just take one pill and just go about your day. It's definitely you have to work, and you have to find the right puzzle to make yourself work, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. And just to go back to my first DMT, I was on Avonex, and I know it was around when you first got diagnosed too. And that was one of my choices. And my doctor put me on that because I didn't have a clue. And I literally 1 month, I lasted a month on that DMT because it was so brutal. I would take that. I would do the shot on Friday. I'd be sick Saturday. I'd be sick Friday night, Saturday, Sunday, and I'd start feeling better only to go to work on Monday. And I went to my doctor, and I'm like, I can't do this, doc. And he switched me to Copaxone right away. And then Copaxone was my drug of choice for the next 15 years. I did great on it. And that's just the thing that I tell people, just because if your first EMT makes you feel like shit, don't hesitate to go to your neurologist and say, hey, doc, I'm not doing good on this. Can we try something else? It's your body, it's your MS. You have the choice to change your DMT whenever you want. You got to talk to your doctor about it.
Yeah, the doctors work for you. They're your care team.
Absolutely.
I developed a pretty good care team over the years, and I have the VA for neurology. I have private neurology for my private insurance. So I do see two neurologists, and I kind of keep the private neurologist there, trying to as a second set of eyes. Like I always see her I see her once a year, and because I'm being primary care for VA now for MS, and I go to her once a year. She goes, "Hey, what's going on? How's the past year been?" So I give her all my clinical notes from the VA. So here's what I've been doing the past year. Here's my, and she checks everything out. She makes sure that we're being proactive and doing things the right way. Yeah, and I like that. Yeah. And I swear by that. And that's why I built my platform on advocating for yourself and making sure you're your own boss.
Yep. Mike, I'll absolutely love talking to you. Just how your attitude is just so amazing on how you deal with this. Let me ask you this question. What, you've been doing this for a while now. I know I have my answers to this. What's been the most frustrating thing about going through life with MS, since you've been diagnosed? Just whether it is the meds, what your perception of you through society, what has been your most frustrating part of this disease?
I think the most frustrating part about the disease was trying to get people to see from our eyes, trying to see what we deal with on a daily basis. And my MS is pretty mild. But it is to me. If I tell the average person about my symptoms, that might not be mild to them. So it's all different. And I think the key is making people understand that, hey, we're all dealing with something, and to give us some grace. When I'm speaking, I have a pretty okay speaking voice at times, but I tend to get my words stripped up. I do mumble sometimes, and I get frustrated when people they don't give me the time to get my words out. And that's always the most frustrating part when you speak to somebody, trying to tell someone you're something for work or for elevator speech, and they cut you off. That's the hardest part. Is trying to get people to show grace and show some emotional intelligence to let you finish your statements and to let you finish your points, because everybody else to get their point out all the time first.
Yeah. I totally relate to that. My first thing that it's just understanding, the way that I've gone through 27 years, and I didn't talk about my MS a lot when I was, early diagnosed, because I was like you you really couldn't tell a whole lot. I was still golfing 18 holes, but the frustrating thing to me is that, when I did have an episode, people would be like, oh, just go and rub some alcohol on it or take a nap, and I would just sit there and be like, yeah, I wish MS worked that way, but it doesn't, and that's the frustrating part to me, is like going through 27 years of people just not understanding what it feels like, and it's hard to get them to understand that.
You actually triggered a thought I just had, and I saw a TikTok the other day that triggered this response in my head as well. If I hear one more person tell me about turmeric and how turmeric's going to save my life, I'm going to throw it at them. Because it's so difficult when you meet people. You say, I have a multiple sclerosis. Oh, have you tried turmeric? Oh, you might have Lyme disease. Oh, you might have something else. Or you might try this. Everyone has a cure. Everyone knows of a guy who cured themselves from MS. Everyone knows a girl who cured themselves from MS. No, you don't.
Yeah.
You know someone who is better because of their lifestyle changes for MS. They haven't cured themselves.
Right.
And that's probably that'd be my number one, what angers me the most. There's no cure for MS. Yeah. There's only ways to manage MS.
Yeah.
so,
Yeah.
so thank you for bringing that up, because that was a great trigger for me.
Hey, no problem. It's just, it is frustrating this, and I'll reiterate what you just said. There is no cure, and that is frustrating. 27 years ago, I was told that, hey, a cure's on the way, and we're still not not as close as I would have liked to have been. And I know a lot of people are searching for that cure, and I think it's going to happen. I mean, let's get your opinion on it. You're an MS Society ambassador. I think it's going to happen. I don't know if it's going to be something that's going to benefit me being 27 years in on the disease, but I think that the people are newer diagnosed. I think that it's going to have a huge a positive effect for them. What are your thoughts on the cure?
In the last 17 years, my thoughts on the cure is I think we're going to find a cure in my lifetime. Will it help my MS? That'll be true. Believe that when I see that, like you just said.
Yeah.
But
right.
If being diagnosed today with MS is not as bad as when we were diagnosed with MS. So when we were diagnosed with MS, we had 3 or 4 drugs. That was it. Nowadays, someone's diagnosed, if they have primary progressive MS, they're diagnosed today, they could be on Everest tomorrow. They can be out of a wheelchair in 2 months. That's the key. And being on the advocacy side for MS with the society, I've seen firsthand how patients have, I see patients that have walkers that don't use walkers all the time. I see people that they only have to use a wheelchair during their crap gap, which is the week before their next infusion or the month before the next infusion. So there's some promising research out there. I think the NIH, before it just froze, the research they've been doing on the repairing myelin is really interesting work. The stem cell research is really good. I know it's no cure right now, but the research is very promising. And I think from a science standpoint, I think we're going to cure this disease in our lifetimes.
I do. I think I agree with you. I think they are so close. And I do agree with you. I think stem cells are going to be the answer. And it's going to be good. I can't wait to see, because science is just, just in the time that I've had this disease, there were 3 meds when I was there, when I got diagnosed, and now there's 26 of them. I mean, they're trying. It's going to happen. I think it's going to happen too in our lifetime. I'm a true believer of that too, Mike. Is there anything No, go ahead, buddy. Go ahead.
No, I was going to say the next hopeful part is having diseases that don't cause adverse side effects. That's my next hopeful problem. I hope that happens here time to time too, because a lot of new medications do have some adverse side effects that you have to be very careful with.
Yeah. So, Mike, what if you had to say one more thing before we started wrapping it up, just to give anybody the motivation to keep on fighting this disease after their diagnosis, if they're in the same situation that you are in, and just what would your message be to them?
Remain optimistic. I mean, I go by a motto by my favorite band, 311, stay positive, love your life, and that doesn't mean being 100% positive all the time, 24/7. It's about how you react to things. And I've learned over the years I can't react negatively. I've seen how my body reacts when I'm a Debbie Downer. When I'm more positive, or more positive outlook in things, I feel better. I get to do things faster. I'm back on the bike faster. I've had flares where I can only do yoga for a month or 2 months or 3 months, but I'm back on the bike in 2 or 3 months. It's a progress. Just stick with it and don't give up hope, and stay positive all your life.
Yeah, and that's just so important. Positivity. I tell everybody, this disease is really easy to be depressed. It's very easy to bitch about it. I can probably fill 3 hours of just bitching about this disease in a podcast, but it's not going to do anybody any good. It's definitely not going to do me any good. It's not going to do anybody around me any good. I try to stay as positive as I can, because you have to. I have a sense of humor with this disease. I use humor. I mean, if I'm going to fall, I always told my kids, you know, hey, just make sure I'm okay. I'll be okay. You know, I mean, you got to laugh at it, because if you don't laugh at it, you're going to tear yourself up mentally.
I dropped something just last night. I was closing my blinds in the kitchen, and we have a liquid barometer on the wall. 50 years old, liquid barometer, been on my wife's family for 50 years. I knocked it off the wall last night by accident and shattered it. I beat myself up all night about it.
Yeah.
She was okay with it. She goes, it happens. It's an accident. And things like that, you can't dwell on that stuff because it is your life.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. It will, buddy. Hey, if anybody wants to connect with you on Facebook, just to follow you and follow your journey biking, like MS, where can they find you? And I will put it in the description. But you can go ahead and say and give any of your social media to follow you on, Mike.
Well, if you search my handle, Mike Bikes for MS on Facebook, it's MikeBikes number FORE at MS. You can find me that way. And in the profile's link tree. And I have my TikTok out there. I have my Instagram out there. I have my fundraising page for walk and bike out there. Everything is out there. My entire story is out there for everybody to review. I update it constantly because our stories change over time. So I try to rewrite my story once a year just to make sure I'm up to date, because I update the newest medication, things like that.
Yeah, absolutely, man. Then that's why everybody that I have on since I started this podcast, Mike, and you're no different. I would love to have you on again just to update us as to where you're at in your journey, because I just think it's important just to hear how people are attacking this disease. And you are absolutely right. This disease does not define you. You can manage it. You just got to figure it out, and you got to customize your way of fighting this disease, because everybody's way is going to be different, but it can be done.
That's correct.
Mike, yes, thank you so much for joining me today. I really appreciate you coming on and spreading awareness about your journey with MS. Do not forget to follow me on TikTok, MS Michigan Man 64. You can also find me on Instagram, MS Michigan Man 64. And you can also find me on Facebook, Brian Wallace out of Brunswick, Ohio. Until the next episode, this is MS Michigan Man 64. Brian, I am out.